So in this video series, Politics Through Inspired Action, I did a video called Do you feel politically homeless or displaced? And over on Twitter, one of the comments that I got was, someone asked me like, oh, so, what did Bernie awaken in you? Because he had mentioned that Bernie's presidential campaigns had awakened something into him, and now he was like totally motivated and passionate about like certain issues and fully on board, right? Which is a big part of Bernie's intention in movement building, right? So Bernie wasn't just running for president; he wanted to create this, political revolution, this movement where he got, millions of Americans involved in the political process because it doesn't matter, you know, it you can get, again, you can be elected to president of the United States, but if you want to pass like bold, aggressive policies that, prioritize people and planet before corporations and billionaires, you're gonna need millions and millions of Americans who are energized, mobilized, and ready to take action on that, right? So, and again, and I totally believe with Bernie that, change happens from the bottom on up. And so, we need more people getting involved. And so I thought that, he asked me like, well, what was it about, what was that got awakened in me and got me motivated, and like, what am I doing now, right? Like what's motivating me and driving me in what I'm doing now related to politics and social issues. And I thought that was a really good question, mainly because this whole thing is about, this video series, Politics Through Inspired Action. My intent with that is to, kind of continue what Bernie, did and continues to do, is get more people involved in the political process. So sharing my personal story might be helpful to some of you who are, like me, who are like me, because, I'll be perfectly honest. Prior to discovering Bernie in 2015, I was one of those apathetic, I don't give a F about politics. I don't like politics because people just get mean, they get combative, people just fight, it causes tension, and just the topic of politics in general, I found repellent. So I was apathetic, and also I had this attitude of what's the point? All the rich and powerful people just control everything. They just install the people that they want into office so they can maintain their power, greed and control. So what is the point? My one vote is not going to make a difference. So I had that attitude for decades, right? And I didn't vote. In fact, I didn't even register to vote until my late 40s. My entire life. And believe you me, throughout that time, I had family members and friends who would give me, give me shit about it, because they're like, how can you like talk about wanting to change the world? Because that's why I had a career in Silicon Valley, because I wanted to change the world through technology. So it's like, well, if you want to do that, why aren't you voting, right? You should, do your civic duty and vote. And again, I was like, well, what's the point? I don't even, And again, I was one of those non-voters that a lot of people, like the active people, don't like, okay? Fully admit that. And then, I did get involved in some activism, but in my head, it wasn't activism, it wasn't politics, it was, I can't stand Monsanto, and I gotta do something about it and tell everybody, like, the what they're doing, they're like poisoning us, they have these toxins, they should be charged with crimes against humanity, right? So I had this big thing related to Monsanto. So the very first protest march I ever participated in was in 2012 with the Global March Against Monsanto march, where like across the globe in multiple cities, people were marching against Monsanto and their evil practices, their GMOs, their toxicity, and all of that. And it was in San Francisco. We started Union Square, marched down Market Street, down, and ended up at the Ferry Building. And we had speakers, and there were signs, and people blow horns and stuff. And I mean, I really got into it, right? It was really exciting, but that was my first march. And then I worked on campaigns. At the time, I was a food blogger, so I was volunteering on campaigns in California, Proposition 37, to get GMO labeling in our state, and then also helped out with Colorado and Washington states' efforts to get GMO labeling. Those in those states, the initiatives got on the ballot for people to vote, and because of huge money from special interests and corporations like Monsanto and all the other big GMO, big biotech, big ag, like all these special interest groups spent tens and tens of millions of dollars. And at the time, it was like that GMO labeling, there was like the largest amounts of like outside spending coming into the states to defeat those bills. And that was my first experience witnessing how big money can come in and squash grassroots efforts and the will of the people who want, to have, like in that case, just be informed. We as consumers have the right to know what's in our food. We have the right, to good health. And if something is going to like impact our health, we should know about it, right? And so that was just like my first introduction to it. And then after that, after those 3 defeats, I to be honest, I felt defeated. And again, it fed into my belief, what's the point? All this big money's going to come in, these corporations, they're just going to come in and just squash everything, right? So what's the point? Well, so then we fast forward to 2015, and then I see a random, actually one step before that. At the beginning of 2015, I saw a documentary called Cowspiracy, and it was about the factory farm system and its impact on the climate crisis. And that documentary opened my eyes. I literally could not believe some of the things that I saw in that video, to the point where like, okay, I just don't believe that. I'm going to do my own research. And I went in, and a bunch of those things were true. But then it got me to learn about I wanted to learn everything about the factory farm system. But then it got me down this big rabbit hole of like learning about, again, not just what happens in the factory farms, but like how the feed, how big GMO is involved, the lobbying, through the USDA, I learned about this thing called checkoff programs, which I didn't even know existed. I got into legislation. I got, what were activists doing? Like this, like the subject of factory farms and just by itself touches so many things. And another thing I learned about was environmental racism. I didn't even know that was a thing until I started researching about factory farms. And so, again, my eyes were opened up to like just all these issues. And it had a personal tie to me because I had health issues that were tied into, toxicity, pesticides that were in my foods, the foods we were eating that, was creating sickness in my body. And so that was eye-opening in itself. So because of my own personal health issues, because when I eliminated all those foods, those toxin foods, my health improved dramatically. So it set me off on this thing to like wanting to inform and help educate the masses, because again, nobody should suffer because of their diet. And like I talk about often, like I'm a big supporter of Medicare for all, and creating a healthcare system that actually works for the people and actually is in the business of healing and wellness. Right now it's in the business of extracting profits, so a handful of corporations and wealthy people can become even more wealthy off of our health, which I think is just immoral and wrong. So I fully support that, but I also believe that we also need to look at why Americans are chronically sick in the first place. Millions and millions of Americans suffer from chronic illnesses. If you look at the top 10 illnesses that people are suffering with in our country, most of them are tied into diet, what we're eating, what we're drinking. And then you take it to another level in terms of like the air and the land and all of that stuff, right? And that ties into the big biotech companies, the chemical companies, pesticide corporations. Like the level of regulations around them is just minimum, when what they can get away with is completely frightening. It's horrifying, it's immoral, and more people should know about it. So again, in the beginning of 2015, I was watching this movie Cowspiracy, and then got to learning about the factory farm system. Then we get to the fall, around August, late summer of 2015, and then on my Facebook feed, I see this random video, and it's about Bernie Sanders, and it got my attention because the title of it is reporter tries to get Bernie to say something negative about Hillary and he doesn't. So I was curious. I'm like, this presidential candidate who I'd never heard of was trying to get Hillary, trying to say something bad about Hillary, and he wouldn't. So I was just curious. I have never heard about that. And again, having been a former corporate marketing and PR person, that just got my curiosity. So I go watch this video. And what it was, Bernie had done a rally in Iowa. He was backstage, and there was a bunch of reporters, journalists there, and he had some time answering their questions. And so, one of these reporter or journalists, tried to bait Bernie into saying something negative about Hillary, and I forget the issue, but Bernie didn't take the bait, and he just went on for about 5 minutes talking about how the system is rigged against the people, how big corporations and billionaires have influence on our policies. And like, I was just like, what? Like, this is a presidential candidate, a politician, actually verbalizing my frustrations and why I'm apathetic. So I'm like, tell me more, right? And so then he goes on about like, yes, these are the problems, and then here's how we can go about fixing them, right? And this is how we can, create change. And I was just so in awe of what I saw. I just blown away. So like, who is this guy? I must learn more about him. So of course I go to Google. I Google him. I go to YouTube and watch all these videos. And then I just get this massive data dump on who is Bernie Sanders. And I was just hooked. Like, here's a guy who is a disruptor. And that appealed to the Silicon Valley in me. That's why I got involved in tech, because I wanted to build technology that was going to help make people's lives better, right? It was going to bust the status quo. And like, again, how do we use technology to make people's lives better? And here's Bernie, like, how can we use politics to make people's lives better? And yes, the system is rigged against you, but we the people, if we come together, we do have the power to change it. So I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Like, this is something that like I can get fully behind. I'm fully passionate about, like, and again, something just started to awaken in me. And I kind of tell people, again, using a tech computer metaphor, it's like, like this piece of code was already in my operating system, just laying dormant, and then it just needed a key to, get the program started. So this new feature got opened up, and Bernie Sanders was the key to like opening up this new feature in my operating system, because I'm not kidding you, I went from apathetic to full on like volunteering, jumping into politics. My friends and family were like, what has happened to you? Because you used to hate politics, and now you're all about Bernie Sanders and talking about Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, the climate change. Like, I'm talking about all this stuff. And then a friend of mine who was also another Bernie supporter, she was like, hey, let's become delegates. Like, let's run. And I'm like, okay, what's a delegate? I don't know what that is, but I'm in. Let's run. I had no idea what it meant to be a delegate. I knew nothing about party politics. So again, fresh eyes, no baggage, nothing, right? So I ended up, and I had no idea becoming a delegate was like actually running for office. Like, you had to go and get people to come vote for you. Like, there was this election and people voted. So I had never run for anything in my life. So that was my first time to do that. And I ended up winning in that election, I won the alternate spot. But there was also another type of delegate called, so those were called district level delegates, where you get elected by the people in your district. Then there are at-large delegates. So a percentage of the delegates are chosen by by the candidate, right? So Bernie Sanders' campaign had a certain number of delegates that they could, pick from to fill out the rest of the slots. And in the California Democratic Party, there also, among those delegates, there had to be a certain amount of delegates that were like women, people of color, disabled, LGBTQ, and veterans, and I think people under 35, right, young. So that there was like representation. So they had quotas to meet. So I kind of filled a double quota of being Asian and being a woman. So I ultimately got selected to be an at-large Bernie delegate to help to represent Asians and women, which was really awesome. So I went to Philadelphia for again, first time not knowing anything about what being a delegate meant, and what was going to be entailed at a convention for the Democratic Party. Because even prior to that, I was not involved in any party politics events or anything. So I was going in cold there, and that convention was a rude awakening. As many of you know, like, being a Bernie delegate was extremely brutal. It was hard emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually. Like, it tested you on multiple levels. But you know what? As hard as it was, I felt this strong sense of purpose. And I was like on a mission, and I wasn't alone, right? And especially with California sent the largest number of delegates for Bernie on the state level, right? So we had a big group, and we were loud, and yes, they stuck us in the corner and we were loud and protesting. So I got to be a part of that, part of that history. And again, as brutal as it was, being a delegate for Bernie is one of the greatest honors of my life. And what kept me going, even though, like, he didn't get the nomination, it was brutal, but what kept me going was that 2020 was a possibility. And so I stayed committed that whole time, the next 4 years, 3.5 years, because I just felt like he's going to run again. And then, yeah, I got involved in the, Run Bernie Run, to help people get like, okay, let's get excited. Let's get Bernie like running for 2020. So I got on board with that, and then full board, like got involved with the 2020 campaign. What was different this time in 2020 and then 2016 was that I started, the Bern Identity started on Facebook in 2016, but I started the Bern Identity Twitter in 2020 because I wanted to separate out my personal Twitter account because I wanted to talk about Bernie Sanders all day long. Like talk about Bernie, the campaign, the movement, like all the time. So I thought it would be better to just start a Twitter account fresh that was just about Bernie Sanders and the campaign, thus the Bern Identity. And that took off in ways I never could have imagined. Which again, I am so grateful for. I've met so many amazing people. I've made friendships that I know will last a lifetime. This movement goes on. And so I am still encouraged, because even though Bernie is most likely not going to run again, like this is 2020 was it. He's now, the saving grace is that he's now the chairman of the budget, the Senate Budget Committee. And he has a lot of power. He has institutional power in that position in the Senate. So that's great. So at least Bernie is elevated to a high position of power like that. So I stay ignited and impassioned and involved in the political process because like I mentioned in the Do You Feel Politically Homeless video, the thing that I feel is different about this movement than other political things is that Bernie really and the movement is really about also tying the issues to again looking at politics through the lens of our hearts, our soul, our spirit. That again we're not just humans with a soul. We're actually a spirit. We're a spirit in a body having this earthbound experience, right? And the issues that we're dealing with is about like the quality of our life. Like, it's about one of my favorite themes through the campaign was, politics at its best is about love. It's about compassion and empathy, and the Not Me Us movement is really about that. It's disrupting politics in the sense that, we are about creating a country that works for all, but coming from a place of love, compassion, and empathy versus the ego, which tends to be, again, about division, being right, being combative, being divisive, like all of that. That's like typical politics, which, again, turns people off. Not Me Us, again, is coming from this space and this frequency of we're in this together. We're gonna fight for someone we don't know. We're gonna work to protect Mother Earth, and again create a livable planet so future generations have a place, to live and thrive on. And so that's what it's all about. That's what keeps me going, right? As long as that spirit is alive, which I believe it will continue, because that's kind of the new earth consciousness, right? That we want to work collectively as a unit, right? Or one of my favorite analogies is, we want to build more longer tables so more people can sit at the table versus building walls to separate us, right? So how can we come together and have more people involved, work for the higher good for all people, and for our planet and for Mother Earth? So that's what keeps me going. And I love hearing like people share their stories. Like what was it about Bernie Sanders' campaign that awakened or ignited you with these issues? Or maybe it was another candidate in 2020, because there were a lot of candidates in 2020 in the Democratic primary. And that got people involved in the political process for the first time, right? And some of them now are awakening and seeing that they actually have more leftists, more progressive leftist ideologies, right? Getting involved in that aspect. So, I'm curious to hear your stories. Please share them. And, because again, if we're gonna to create the change that we want, we need more people to get organized, to be organizers, to be mobilizers, to be uplifters, to energize, and remember all that energy we felt at Bernie's rallies, that amazing high intense energy. Like, I believe that's still there, and we can have it again. I constantly think about, like, well, how do we get back to that level again and stay there? And I know we will. We will again. I don't know how or when, but we will, because we've done it before, so we will do it again. And as always, I love the phrase "not me, us." Politics at its best is about love, empathy, and compassion. I'm trying out this series to show politics through inspired action, through the lens of the heart, soul, and spirit. So let's work together, and solidarity.